Imagine sitting on your couch watching TV and suddenly noticing that you cannot see your hand moving back and forth directly in front of you. This type of vision loss can be caused by uncontrolled diabetes, which leads to diabetic retinopathy. According to the Mayo Clinic, the potential effects of diabetic retinopathy are vision loss and even blindness. Understanding diabetes brings health awareness to your health. But first, to fully understand diabetes, you must understand what diabetic retinopathy is, what diabetes is, and how your vision works. To begin, diabetes mellitus is a disease in which in which glucose builds up in your blood because your body lacks a hormone called insulin. Insulin is directly responsible for detecting, breaking down, and absorbing glucose from your blood. With time, the unmetabolized glucose builds up in your bloodstream and causes damage to various organs. There are two types of diabetes. A type 1 diabetes, most commonly known as juvenile diabetes, is found in young adults and children. A type 1 diabetic does not produce any insulin, while on the other hand, a type 2 diabetic does not produce enough insulin. According to Dr. Ziegler's report on the challenges of diagnosing and treating diabetes, diabetes type 1 is on the rise and has dramatically risen over the past 2 decades. Now let's review on how your vision works so you can understand how diabetic retinopathy affects your eyes. To begin, light passes through a clear membrane called the cornea. The cornea then is responsible for about 2/3 of your vision or seeing power. Then as the light passes through the cornea, it enters in through a large black hole or opening called the pupil. Once it passes the pupil, the light then hits your lens. Think of your lens like a camera lens that helps focus images. As it passes through your lens then, it goes through a clear gelatinous substance called your vitreous and then ends at its final endpoint on your retina. Your retina contains photoreceptors that are responsible for absorbing light and then transmitting it into electrical impulses to your brain. And then your brain ultimately receives the lights and makes this light into an image. Now, diabetes retinopathy is what affects your retina. Your retina contains blood vessels, and as the unmetabolized glucose circulates through the blood vessels, it damages them. There are 2 types of classifications of diabetic retinopathy. There's non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy and proliferative diabetic retinopathy. Non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy is the beginning stages in when the vessels weaken and may bleed. But in proliferative diabetic retinopathy, the blood vessels are so weakened that new fragile vessels grow in its place, but they're fragile, and so they begin to bleed. Unfortunately, from the proliferative diabetic retinopathy, other complications can surface, such as vitreous hemorrhages, retinal detachment, the formation of scar tissue, and even glaucoma. If any of these are left untreated, it can lead to irreversible vision loss. Now, it is important to understand the prevalence of diabetes because it does have permanent vision damage. So, the Center of the Disease Control and Prevention reports that about 1% of Americans under the age of 20 are diagnosed with diabetes. Then at the age of 20 or older, there's about 11.3% of Americans diagnosed, and there's about 26% of Americans 65 years or older that are diagnosed. So it's important to understand how prevalent diabetes is and the seriousness of effects it can have on your vision so you can be aware of your health and of your body because knowledge is power.